decided that we will play Hades a little later. I wanna power through this video. Chances are I'll switch over at like 8, but we can probably get a little bit more out of this video right now. I'm kind of curious where it ends up. So we could, let's go playback speed, 135, 140 maybe?
But not because of Greg's views, but because of the confidence and satisfaction that they bring. I think I'd feel just as much meaning in my life if I was a convicted Muslim, or were I a Jain or something like that. I think I would find that fulfillment.
So the content of the theology has no bearing in your mind on the way a person experiences their life.
So of course it does.
Can you
Of course
explain
it
that
does.
just in simple
Specifically,
terms? Content of the theology.
Well, the content, well, you talk about different religions, and there's these different religions are they cannot all be true, as Alex has pointed out. They have different content. They say different things about human beings. For example, the view that human beings are just an illusion, the reality is illusion, Maya, that kind of thing. Well, that seems to me to convey a certain understanding to human beings about themselves and about the world. If you have a view that
I imagine that this is going to be some type of like straw man on whatever he's talking about, because you can tell he doesn't know too much about it.
that human beings are significant individuals, this is going to convey a whole different experience that they have. So in other words, the theology that they believe is true is going to affect their feelings and their experience. This is what I was getting back at a little bit ago when I talked about the person whose life has been changed by becoming a Christian. And these aren't just what you explained to your friend. These are not things that just happen here and there, but there seems to be a very, very broad experience of this. And a change that doesn't depend on circumstances, okay? It's because they adopt a understanding of the world that I think is an accurate understanding, and this is why their emotions and their experience follows along, because they're choosing an accurate understanding of the world. When you look at Jesus in the Gospels, I think it's so interesting to me that people read the Gospels to be uplifted by the reading of it. It seems that misses the point that Jesus is talking about the way the world is. He's teaching about the nature of reality. He was a Torah-observant Jew. He wasn't a Hindu, he wasn't a Buddhist, he was a Jew. And he spoke in the context of that, okay? So just to simply read the Gospels as if we're going to read the some nice things that people said to make me feel better is missing Jesus' point when he's trying to describe the nature of reality.
I don't think that's how the gospel should be read, but I do
One
think,
second. I have a question for you on that. It's a personal question more than anything. So I find myself in the same position as Alex, where I think I'd be happier, all things considered, if I had an anchoring in a religion. I think that's like a subjectively true, that I'd be happier. Probably just because it would close a gap of some sort. It would anchor me in some way.
Answer a question.
It would answer a question, and then it would give me more of a structure to my decision making. And you know, it would mean that when I have moments of suffering, I'd have a solution to that moment of suffering. So if my parents end up dying someday, which I'm sure they will, I will believe that they are still alive and they are somewhere and they're fine, which will ease my suffering. So I agree with Alex in that regard. The problem I have is, in order to adopt that view, I need to believe it. It's true. Like people aren't very good at lying to themselves.
Good point.
And also when you talk about, my friend in Dubai has had this experience. He now feels better. He could have well felt better, I believe, if he had, believed that Islam was true and become a Muslim. So it's the feeling itself. People can get in a lot of ways. I know people that actually would tell you that they feel better now that they're out of the cult and they're agnostic.
Yeah, sure.
And the cult made them feel terrible. Now they're agnostic. They feel better. Does that mean agnosticism is truth?
So the presumption that you made is a presumption. We have to keep that in mind. I mean, the people that I have talked to who were former Muslims and are now Christians, very devout Muslims, they did not have the experience of satisfaction and fullness and connection with God in Islam that they do in Christianity, okay? So we want to be careful that we don't
there are
just
people who do the opposite,
stipulate.
Yeah, there's people that have gone the other way, and they'll be in the comment section right now saying, well, I went from Christianity to Islam.
Okay, well, sure. I'm just telling you what I know of those people, okay? And I think it's a mistake to say, well, everybody has their own religion, they have their own experience with their religion, because I don't think that's the case. I'm not saying there aren't satisfied Muslims. That's not what I'm saying, or Buddhists or Hindus or whatever. What I'm saying is there is an evidential element to the changed life, okay? And it may not be decisive. There may be other things that are involved, okay? I do think that for many Christians, I think you've made this point in the past too, it's the experience with God that makes the difference. But it's not that the other evidences for the existence of God, maybe philosophical type of evidence, haven't made a difference. Because I've talked to lots of people where they have made the difference, moving them in that direction.
So this argument is just not strong because he hasn't like actually contended with the fact that there's other people who have gone. I don't want to just say exactly what just happened. They just pointed out there's people that have started with Christianity, have gone to something else, and they still, and they now feel this purpose, and they didn't find it in Christianity. There's people who didn't make a change, but they just find purpose in other things, other religions. He's on one hand pointing out that the experience of having a meaningful life and feeling like feeling purpose is evidence of what Christianity can bring, or the truth of Christianity. But at the same time, he now needs to grapple with all this other evidence that points to something else. Like he's not allowing this logical contradiction to happen, or at least he's not acknowledging it.
The point there that it's evidential, that's a presumption.
What I mean by evidential is that there is information that can be brought to bear that seems to be evidence indicating that the belief system is true. It's
Is that a
accurate.
presumption?
I don't know why you would call it a presumption.
Isn't the evidence that Christianity is true from the increased sense of purpose that people get from becoming a Christian?
I think that's one of the evidence. It's a subjective evidence, yeah.
So it's a
I mean,
presumption.
and
the
it's
truth
because-
of Christianity.
Well, I wouldn't build the whole thing.
But
just
it's
on that
evidence.
case.
It's contributing evidence to the actual
Yes,
truth
yes.
of
Think of it
Christianity
this
as
way.
well.
If the story of reality is simply that God made us to be with Him, and then we find the way that God intends for us to connect with Him, principally through forgiveness and be restored to our relationship with the Father, and then that gives us, when we do that, a deep sense of satisfaction. I do think that's evidential.
You know, in Alex Field, he could explain that through neuroscience, right?
Yeah,
Serotonin, dopamine, endorphins.
Yeah, so can I go back to something real quick?
Go ahead.
So, I was thinking about the Sisyphus example.
Yes.
And I was just thinking to myself, so many people go to the gym to do futile physical activity.
But not on its own for eternity with no sense in which it's improving their life. Right? Imagine going to the gym and not only is it not making you healthier, it's actually just making you fatter, and you have to do it forever, for the rest of eternity, for no reason, with no end. And then somebody
Yeah,
says,
so-
well, all you've got to do is imagine that person being happy.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting because then that presumes that the attitude through which you approach the action is what determines it.
Determines what?
Determines whether you're happy or not, right? So every time you eat,
Yep.
you buy yourself a trip to the toilet. This is something you can never escape.
Sure.
It is true for all time. And yet, how do you feel about going to the toilet?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're getting
So,
at.
so I think it's,
Okay,
it's
so I think what Dr. K's doing is what I did earlier, which is pointing out that we have constraints in our life. We have Sisyphus-like constraints in our life that aren't as extreme, but by accepting these constraints, going to the toilet's like a very simple one. We could figure out what we can do, what freedom we have around those constraints. So I brought up the idea that Sisyphus could do all kinds of things. He could literally write a book. Obviously he's going to have to memorize the book like Solzhenitsyn, but he could write a book while he's going up this thing. It could be a novel. It could be anything. He can work towards something. He has to keep pushing up this boulder. That's for sure. But he's got the freedom to go do that. If he were to do that, he would feel really great about this thing. And you might ask, why would he want to do this book? And he might, or I might reply that within his constraints, that's actually quite a rewarding and interesting thing to do. And then he gets to build that out. I guess you could argue no one's going to see it and whatnot. And I mean, this just kind of points out that everyone's got a different subjective take on what they find important in life. And the nice thing about looking at Sisyphus is then we get to look at our own life and we realize, well, there's analogies between us and Sisyphus, but we actually got a lot more freedom than Sisyphus has. So Sisyphus could work on his singing. He could do something that makes every single time he puts this thing up a slightly more elegant. He could focus on his breathing. He could do mindfulness meditation while he's pushing this thing up, and that will affect his life. There's so many things that he can do that will actually make his time more enjoyable or more engaging.
interesting, right? Because the problem of Sisyphus is in the way that he views it. And this is exactly why I think the paperclip example is actually such a good one, because I think what we find when we look at some of these things like radical acceptance, dialectical behavioral therapy, sort of the ways in which people become happy despite the fact that there are painful things in life, it is an attitudinal shift.
Totally. I think one of the reasons why it might seem like we keep talking cross purposes is because I think you are offering an explanation for why people feel a particular way, and I'm trying to see whether those feelings are, shall we say, philosophically validated, whether they are.
So yeah, like why do we need them to be philosophically validated? The real perspective here, though, is what we can do about it, right? Where the goal of this whole discussion is how people can change their lives. And so the truth is in the practical utility of knowing these things, right? So it would be like, I know that if I were to do this thing, then my life would go in that way. So if I were to believe that I'm doing it, that's the truth. That's the only truth that there's there, or that's there. That needs to be there. I just need to believe that I am doing something. I understand what the expectation, or I have an expectation about the outcome, and I'm going to go do it. And then, you create that outcome, and you get the enjoyment out of knowing that you've done it.
Those feelings are sensitive to truth. If the way you feel about the world is accurate. So I can perfectly understand that it's possible for Sisyphus to be happy. What I'm saying is that I think that the philosophical underpinning that would be required for him to be content in that condition is unsatisfying, at least to me. So
So what is a philosophical truth?
it doesn't have to. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say philosophical truth, but I mean to separate it from what you might describe as like a neurological truth, which is to say it could be true that your brain believes this or believes that based on this or that condition. I'm saying that totally, but what I'm interested in is the thing that it believes. Is it true or false? You know, it could be in
The
same
thing
way
that's
that-
missing in Alex's framing here is the idea of, like, this is what we do in part one, the idea of freedom, like the idea of being able to do something. Like, what does that mean? And without the idea that we can do something because of these facts about neurobiology, then you're just lost with facts, and then that's it. You're trying to figure out what to do when the facts are right there. You know exactly what you could do, but he's not making that jump.
that believing in Christianity can make you happy, it can make you sad, and you can scan someone's brain. You can put them in an MRI scanner and scan their brain at the moment they convert to Christianity and see that it starts going haywire.
But the
nothing to do with
MRI
the
is not
truth.
going to show any beliefs. It
Nothing to
shows
do with the truth of the brain.
neurological
Yes.
activity.
Exactly.
Beliefs aren't in the brain.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. In this
I kind of
so,
agree with that.
so Alex, I think this is I thank you so much for pointing out how we're kind of talking across each other, because I think this is the really weird thing. And I'm going to say something, and then as we talk about consciousness and what we just talked about, I'm going to torpedo it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we sort of find is that from a practical sense, and this could be where like philosophy, I don't know how the word practical ties together with philosophy, because I tend to think of philosophy as sort of practical. We can go into that in a second, but I think from the perspective of finding purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not talking about purpose as a capital P truth, right? Like capital T truth.
Mm-hmm.
Finding purpose, it may not be philosophically satisfying to you, but what we sort of know from empirical evidence of people who are purposeless and people who are purposeful is that the subjective feeling of purpose comes out of a number of different things. Like I mentioned, like kind of autonomy, being able to detect your emotions, also a sense of like narrative identity. So having a purpose in life requires a you. And one of the reasons that no one feels like they are going somewhere in life is because they don't really have a clear sense of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's a great kind of catch that we're sort of talking across purposes, because I don't know, the thing that you find not philosophically true, maybe neurologically true, but isn't philosophically true, I don't know how to approach that. I mean, I think I sort of do, because if we talk about consciousness and subjective experience and how your friend was transformed, and by the way, he may not be transformed. So speaking of coping, there's a chance that when someone, drastically joins a religion and like, this is great, that is like the mother of all copes. Right? So sometimes it's not identity formation, it's actually identification, where like, I'm going to join this team, and now I'm on this team, and now that I have this team, now I know who I am, now I have a purpose, like everything kind of gets laid out. But oftentimes, this is also why religion is not like 100% at giving people happiness and things like that, because there is an internal subjective experience of a relationship with God or something like that, which I think we can segue to consciousness. That's ultimately what determines whether you feel really good about it. And then the other really interesting thing is, through some of those subjective experiences, I think the people who have these subjective experiences believe that it gives them access to truth with a higher T, like the Gnostics and folks like that.
I did something at 24 years old. That has had profound impact on my life. I set myself the challenge of posting every single day on my social media channels. And at the time, I was doing it to grow my following. But it had this picturing what its following being at half the beat. If we each have a specific, just bring it back down to did with Adobe Express. That's Adobe.
Yeah, I can't believe every single time that Dr. K says something, they cut the line of talk. Like, no one's actually engaging with these points. And it's so funny that whenever Dr. K is saying something, he's saying it in an authoritative way. Like, he's just telling people how it is. And yeah, it's
Adobe.ly.
it's just falling on deaf ears.
Let me just bring it back down to some of the popular questions we had from our audience. One of the most popular questions we had is, do we each have a specific purpose, or is it self-chosen, Greg?
Well, my view, if God has made us for a reason and he wants us to be in a
might
relationship
skip
with us,
past this, guys.
each individual person has different capabilities, and fulfilling those capabilities that God has given him, general ones and in the kind of the
If Stephen Bartlett had gotten cancer at 1 year old and I
I see,
died,
yeah. Well, then you wouldn't be fulfilling
Yo,
the particulars that God
welcome
had
back
intended
on
for
your
you.
helmet.
But that kind of thing happens because we live.
I
in a
think I'm just skipping by this guy's talk
didn't
now.
read
I
both
think
parts.
I'm
Okay.
done with
That's
him.
pretty much quantifiable.
Does that include other species of human? Homo neanderthal?
Well,
Homo
I know
erectus,
that's a
Homo-
question that a lot of people are discussing right now.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and where exactly do you draw the line? And I'm not. That isn't that. Had an
We got to
impact on
skip
both
that. We got to just wait until
ultimate purposes
Dr.
that
K
God has for
starts
them.
talking again.
Just to be clear, children
Dr. K literally just dropped another set of bars.
get cancer
Sure.
because, say, 2 million years ago, roughly, the start of the human species.
I'm not going to set a date on it.
Some
Some of these are in rebellion because it's not the way individual
with a purpose that was endowed.
instance and how it falls short.
Alex, I want to put the same question to you, which is, do you think that you were born with a purpose that was endowed for your life?
No, not in the literal sense. I think
Okay.
that I was born with literal like proclivities built into my
What do you mean by
consciousness and my
proclivities?
DNAs. Almost wants to do tendencies. Yeah,
Yeah.
tendency is a great word. Yeah. For example, my tendency to eat food. I don't think I learned that. I think I was born with it. But it's like I would use the language of when you say, if you said, do you think that you were given hunger from birth? I'd be like, no, in a poetic sense maybe. But what I mean to say is I was born with this thing called hunger, which I didn't learn, which was just a part of my makeup. I think the same thing is true for many motivations of life, such as the sort of meaning that you might report feeling. I think it's there from childbirth.
Same question for you, Alec. Do you think that we each have a specific purpose, or is it self-chosen?
I think it's both. So I'm going to introduce two concepts that we haven't talked about yet, dharma and karma. And I
Ooh.
think these are
There it is. He's about to bring it up. This is what happens when the friend group has two opinionated humanities, social sciences students, and that one MD who just came out of ethics class. Nice. Yeah, this is a crazy conversation. I don't understand what is like. I mean, I guess in theory, on paper, this is like a really interesting conversation. It's just that. Yeah, it's really turned out to be not as beneficial or not as like productive, I should say.
So I'm going to introduce two concepts that we haven't talked about yet, dharma and karma. And I think these are concepts that are sometimes hard to understand. I'm going to do my best to kind of speed run them. So dharma is the Sanskrit word that kind of gets translated as duty. The way that I would describe dharma, the reason I think it's so important is right now if we look at the world, people are like not having a good time. And oftentimes what they do is they're stuck between this choice of doing what they want and doing what they should. So doing what they want is maybe dopaminergic, is maybe fun in some way. Doing what they should is like painful in some way. So for me, what I think dharma is like sort of duty, but I think the key thing that helps people once they find their dharma is it's what allows you to choose the negative thing. It's what allows you to choose the hard thing. So if someone points a gun at me and I look at that gun means pain, suffering, death, my life will end and then I will have nothing to leave behind me, so my purpose will end. So I try to move away from that thing. But if someone points the gun at my child because I have this overwhelming sense of love and joy or whatever, I step into the path of that thing. So I think once we understand what our duty is, that gives us a sense of tethering. It gives us a sense of direction. I think what confuses a lot of people is that they think duty is like some transcendental, it's like a big thing, like duty with a capital D, like I was born on this earth to do these like particular big tasks, like I need to say cure cancer or something like that. Oftentimes dharma is really small. So the way
duty is not transcendent, and it's not tied to some moral transcendent thing.
Oh, yeah, that's like, oh man. I hope they have that discussion because I think Dr. K could run circles on this guy. There it is. Sanskrit means he's coming at it from a Hindu lens, right? I think. I don't actually know, but here we go. John Calvin speaking. Yeah, let's see. Let's see how they deal with this.
To do these like particular big tasks, like I need to say cure cancer or something like that. Oftentimes dharma is really small. So the way
duty is not transcendent, and it's not tied to some moral transcendent thing.
I think I don't know about moral. So this is where I think like
You said should.
Yeah,
want
sure.
versus should. So that's usually a moral term, right?
In the West, right? So I think there's a whole difference.
Ah.
I'm using dharma, and that's what people will like.
In the West, should is okay. Yeah, I think should usually comes down to, like, this is why I think there's a really big difference between morality and ethics. Because ethics, as far as I could tell, is just, I mean, maybe ethics is probably going to talk about morality here. Moral principles that govern a person's behavior. Yeah, you know what? Ethics is just moral principles. Okay. Yeah, so this is actually more akin to what I was thinking of. Guidelines for behavior that help individuals and societies determine what is right or wrong. Because this is often serving as a system of moral principles or standards. So yeah, so like I still think it's useful to separate these ideas. Ethics in terms of rules of like right and wrong, but morality in terms of like what is good and what is bad. Like in a whole, like a more, high level or zoomed out existential transcendent level. But ethics in terms of like contextual ethics, I think. Morality and ethics are the same thing. If you're talking about politics, which some say is a branch of ethics, then it's a bit different. Moral is Latin and ethics is Greek, even etymology. Oh, wow, okay. All right, this is then maybe we just have a difficulty in our language here. How do I go about this? All right. When we talk about deontics, are we talking, is it all morality? Morality? No, so it's probably this. Deontic is probably what we were looking for. It's concerned with obligation, permission, and related concepts. So it doesn't have to necessarily be moral, right? But you could have like deontic ethics. This is probably what we're looking for. Meta ethics, maybe, like Nietzsche did. Not good and evil, but good and bad. Yeah, it's just more contextual, like how, I always talk about this in the context of achieving some goal. Like, if I want to run a marathon, then I actually have to run that marathon, right? Like if I want the accolade, I must actually do the thing. And that's like so it's yeah, if ethics doesn't just pertain to, contextual rules, then we could say it's deontic. It has to do with the obligation, like you have to do this thing. But I still like the idea of using ethics. It's just maybe that's not the best term. Yeah, because we want to use a term that is intuitive. Deontic isn't the best, but like Brandom used the term deontic normative. So this is where he's talking about like deontic norms. This is norms about what you ought to do. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. And probably not. Yeah, we should hold off on ethics until part 3. We should talk about this in terms of like deontics. All right, I'm gonna have to figure that one out. We might actually have to do like a slight change of language in the document. I'm not sure how I go about that. I don't remember, but we'll get there. I'll figure it out. We haven't gotten there yet in our read through, and maybe once we get there, I'll make the change. Yeah. What got us on this topic? Was he saying so? Oh yeah, he's saying that duty is like he's pointing out that he's talking about duty in a more deontic way than a moral way. So it's things that you ought to do, but not necessarily because they're like transcendently good or bad. And I imagine that's the Eastern view. Off topic, but I think you'd have fun on the philosophy experiment site. The philosophy experiment site. Oh, we should do the... oh my gosh, should you kill the fat man? We got the ad. Oh no. Aha. So this is probably my browser doing this. Is this not like... I'm guessing this is completely wrong. So I'm gonna open this guy real quick. All right, here we go. All right, this activity is a treatment of some of the issues thrown up by a thought experiment called the trolley problem, which was first outlined by the... But before we start properly, we need to ask you 4 preliminary questions so we get a sense of the way that you think about morality. There are no right or wrong answers. Just select the option that most corresponds to your view. Torture, as a matter of principle, is always morally wrong. Yeesh. Oh gosh, this is terrible. As a matter of principle here is a little ambiguous, but I mean, in theory, no, but I would also push for a moral framework that doesn't allow us to torture anyone, right? So it's like I have a semantic issue with the idea of there being a principle, but I would also push for no torture to be allowed. So this would be like there's no way of getting past this. How do we want to go about this? All right, I'll go in like I'll go in the more intuitive way, the way that other people would go about this. So I'll say yes. My moral framework would be there's no condition where we should be torturing, because we know that not only is it excruciating, even for people that we might think deserve torture, which that's a crazy discussion to have. It's not productive. It's not like it's retribution versus something rehabilitation. It's not a rehabilitation at all. Now you could, even in the case of like torturing someone for information, we know that doesn't really work. So there's I can't find a good reason for why. But once again, if we're gonna go like semantic and whatnot, I don't know if I would say that there is a moral code as a matter of principle. This is my moral code, and I would try to assert it onto other people, or at least convince other people about it. But we're gonna go my moral code here. The morality of an action is determined by whether, compared to the other available options, it maximizes the sum of total. Oh my gosh. Sum total of happiness of all the people affected by it. Man. I have to say no, but I'm saying no on more of a philosophical principle now. Oh, geez. It is always everywhere wrong to cause another person's death, assuming they wish to still survive. If the outcome, okay, no, we gotta go no there. If you could save the lives of innocent people without reducing the sum total of human happiness and without putting your own life at risk, you are morally obliged to do so. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, what's going on here? Good, that's the preliminary questions to date have completed this activity. The 4 charts show how they respond to those questions. Always wrong. No. I was off on that one, or I was not in the, and then obliged. All right. You will now be presented with 4 different scenarios to test your moral intuitions against the answers you gave to the first 4 questions. Yikes. The runaway train. The brakes of the train that Casey Jones is driving have just failed. There are 5 people on the track ahead of the train. There's no way that they can get off the track before the train hits them. The track is a slide. Is this just the normal trolley problem? We should turn the train. Absolutely. I'm just going to read this. I don't know why we need to get the whole story here. Should he push the fat man onto the track, 1 dead or yes, none of these are going to play out like this, but I'll just, we'll play the numbers game here. Should Marty push the fat saboteur onto the track? Oh, the saboteur. Yeah. Also, there's the other thing of like, I wouldn't do this in the scenario. Not Casey Jones. Okay, so this scenario is identical to the preceding scenario, but with one crucial difference. This time, Marty Bakerman knows with absolute certainty that the fat man on the bridge is responsible for the failure of the train's brakes. Upset by train fare increases, he sabotages the brakes with the intention of causing an accident. All right, we're going to push him again. All right, I think this is too much. It's too much that I might want to read right now. Be tortured? Oh my gosh. Yeah, so this is one of those situations. So I was answering the previous question under the under in with the knowledge of how like the chance of torture leading to information being given up. So now that they're putting in false statistics, they've got me. I would if in this scenario we actually knew this, then yeah, we would probably run it. But actually, how many people are dying here? What's going on here? Oh, it's an major urban center? Oh, yeah, absolutely. But this is really unrealistic. And also, yeah, never mind. All right, I'm calling it there. There's one other website I think we should go to that's similar, which is like I think it's a trolley problem that just keeps getting more crazy. I forget where it is though, or like how I found that. Where it might be in one of these things. Nah. Yeah. This is an excellent site. There's one quiz / bunch of questions on there. I don't remember which, where it asks you philosophical questions, and if even one of them contradicts the logic of another answer, you get hit. 3 hits and you're out, something along those lines. I mean, I could probably answer it. Or if I knew that was the goal, I could probably follow. Like, I could probably let it go. But the issue is always going to be that, like, there's always more usually at play than what the question is giving you. So it would be more of it's more like a IQ test where you have to like follow some pattern rather than actually apply your own morality. Okay, there used to be a Catholic guy on here who would just spend his streams going through these and asking for chat's opinion. That's funny. That's pretty great.
Put morality onto dharma in the West,
Okay.
right? So I think there's a whole different set of
using it?
axioms.
Okay.
I'm using dharma, and that's what people will like put morality onto dharma, where I don't think that's actually fair. So going back to I have a duty, just to give another example, and y'all can decide whether this is moral or not. But when I'm sort of working in the emergency room and a patient walks in, I have a duty to that patient. So what a lot of people don't understand about dharma is that it is very environmentally determined. So your dharma will depend somewhat on the family that you have, the responsibilities that you have. If you have children, you have a dharma to those people. So I think that's one part of what we would call purpose. I think the other part of purpose, and I think this gets really closer to the more Western conception, is karma. So going back to your question about if a child with cancer dies at the age of 1, is their purpose fulfilled? Arguably yes, because that could have been their purpose in this life, right? So their purpose could have been. So there's a really interesting story about many years ago there were a group of angels. I'm just going to use the Western terminology, devas, who disturbed Shiva in his meditation. And so he cursed them, and he said, the curse that you guys are going to do is y'all are going to be born on the earth for one lifetime of a human. And then the devas were like, oh my God, like this is terrible. Like we're going to be cursed to be born on the earth, and the earth is full of suffering and Sisyphus, and there's no meaning with a capital M. So then they go to Shiva's daughter and they ask her, hey, can you help us out? Like, can you please go talk to your dad? Can you please get him to change his sentence? And she says that Shiva's never going to change his sentence. That's impossible to do. He's also kind of this embodiment of karma and things like that. So he says, but I can help y'all out. What I can do is I'm going to be born with y'all. And then there's this other story in the Mahabharata where basically she has 7 children and then she drowns them the day after they're born. And so she says, the technical situation is you're going to be born for one lifetime. I can make a lifetime happen in a moment.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's moral. I don't know if it's mythology.
But a potential explanation for why children get cancer.
It's a potential explanation for why children get cancer. Now, I think the karma thing is when you said, is your purpose in life predetermined? So I think that you inherit.
So just to point out, that is like to say that that's the child's purpose is like, it's retrospective. It's, you're looking back and you're saying, because it died, that was its purpose. I can tell Greg is tweaking to say something right now. Alex fidgeting those fingers. Yep, I feel like that's the thing. Like, it really should be Dr. K against all, because like the stuff that Dr. K is talking about really goes against what the Christian thinks, and what he's talking about kind of isn't like totally connecting yet with Alex. So I think it would be cool to just have discussions with Dr. K, honestly. We should just start watching Dr. K videos on this channel.
Certain amount of circumstances, and that part of your purpose will be in relation to the circumstances that you inherit. But the other thing about karma, which I think a lot of people misunderstand, is they think that it means destiny. I think all it means is Newton's third law, which is every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That while you may inherit a set of circumstances, the way that you act is sowing seeds for your future life. So this is where, like, you know, I know I'm introducing a bunch of concepts, and it's interesting. We started a membership program here at Healthy Gamer, and part of the reason we did that is because a lot of these concepts, if you turn them into like 50-minute YouTube videos, people just end up with more questions than answers. So we go into a lot of depth, and I think it requires some depth because I'm sure everybody who's listening has a ton of questions. But in order to succinctly answer your question, I would say that, yeah, you were born for, I don't know about a specific reason, but there's a set of different things which only you can do. Like, you are a unique set of genetics, you are a unique set of experiences, you are a unique set of psychology. And this process in psychiatry is something that we call meaning making, helps a lot when people have trauma, right? So to help someone understand, why did this terrible thing happen to you? And once you make meaning from it, that helps you adaptively. But I think that it's also not like predestined necessarily. You can procrastinate on fulfilling your karmas, and then they'll just keep coming back.
So, Dr. K, I still have a question.
Yes, we pretty much align with what Dr. K's saying, but I feel like we still go about it in a slightly more effective way, where we don't consider that, you know, like the purpose is your circumstances and whatnot. It's real for us, like for this document, it's really about like mindfully looking at your own experience and seeing and considering what those constraints are, and then considering what you can do within those constraints. So we still don't have to what's the word? Evoke any of these broader concepts of like karma or purpose in any larger sense. Like, we're literally just leveraging people's conceptual understanding of these words, and then we're saying, okay, now let's use them for the sake of your own goals and well-being. That's so strange. I was just thinking about Newton. I was going to say Dr. K is like Newton, the scientist alchemist. That's actually really interesting. And I know he had that discussion with Dr. Mike where they were kind of really going over that. And funny enough, Dr. Mike was like playing the science guy on that one. But I think it is quite effective what Dr. K's got going on here. We might need to look through that Dr. K curriculum and figure out what's necessary for part 3. That's going to be a part 3 research topic. We should go through Dr. K's whole curriculum. Yeah. All right. This has been productive. Let's keep going. I do want to start Hades though. All right. Maybe we'll go for like a half an hour and then switch over.
About this, you
Yeah.
talk about duty, and I'd asked about morality there, and you kind of begged off on that. Well, not really, but then you use the word obligation and emergency room, and it sounds to me, when you talk about those things, you are actually invoking moral categories, things you ought to do, you have an obligation to do, you have a duty to do, maybe the right thing. You didn't use this phrase, but it sounds like you're saying this is the right thing to do, the virtuous thing to do, as opposed to the wrong thing to do. So how am I to understand those phrases?
So I think I shouldn't be doing this. I should just let him answer the question. But I think this guy's got like a lot of weight on those words, and I guess he's not empathizing with the idea that Dr. K might have a different understanding when he evokes words such as duty and obligation. However, I don't think Dr. K was talking about virtue. I think Dr. K was talking about, I think he was very clear how he was not using the moral language, and he was talking more on the, what I'll say is the deontic language. Free will doesn't exist in Calvinist theology, by the way. Yeah, you were saying that. Yep. Moral duty is bound to God, quite literally. Yeah. Now, you could talk about the stuff that, like Dr. K was talking about, in the sense of moral duty to God, and now you just have to make sure that God is something like your conscience. Because even for Dr. K, even for anyone that's dealing with Dharma, they're interfacing with that Dharma through their own experience, through their conscious experience. So we can abstract that and say that it's their conscience It's whatever's putting into words what they're thinking. So yeah, you have a duty to your conscience, and the question is that necessarily a moral duty? And we take the stance that not necessarily. It's not necessarily a moral duty. It's contextual. Just like, so we actually take like a pretty similar Dr. K path, even well into part 3, because if the goal is to live a fulfilling life, then you can think, okay, what is it that I ought to do in order to get that goal? That's not even moral. Like you're still not in the moral category. You're only in the moral category once you consider that being moral actually leads to the meaningful life. So now you have to consider, okay, what is not just deontic, but what is deontic moral? Like what ought I do morally? And that's one of the things that you ought to do in order to have a meaningful life. So it's actually, the moral is actually like embedded within this larger non-moral deontic view of what will actually lead you to the meaningful, emotionally rewarding life. But that said, we evoke this, like, once we start talking about morality, now we can talk about conscience and morality as such. And that morality and the moral obligations should actually put constraints on what you can do in order to feel meaningful and emotionally rewarding. There are things you could probably do that are immoral that can lead you to living a meaningful and emotionally rewarding life, but we have to it now needs to but it now needs to interplay with this moral life. So that's probably going to be how part 3 goes. I'm kind of thinking about these topics for the first time. So yeah, we'll figure that one out when it gets there. I'm going to be honest. I think the boomers might have been right. What did they say? Well, I feel like the boomers are just kind of in this ignorance is bliss stage. And I'm obviously generalizing between a lot of people. It's all about going to the gym and buying a house. Yeah, going to the gym obviously is a huge deal. Put your phone down is a great thing as well. Put your phone down, go to the gym. But you still need some of the other things. So Dr. K, I don't know if you were here when Dr. K said it, but he said, what were the 3 things he said? Oh, one was self-actualization, or like self-direction. Like you have to feel like you're doing the thing. So you can get that out of the putting the phone down, knowing that you're doing that, and going to the gym, knowing that you're doing that. The second one was a challenge. So being at like the edge of your abilities, like, going a little further. So that you can get from going to the gym, obviously. And then the last one was a sense of recognition, almost. Like it was a sense that, my identity is not only recognized by myself, but recognized by others and accepted and whatnot. So yeah, you get that also if you are in like a community while you're going to the gym. Probably like if you had friends going to the gym and you guys were all working. So yeah, that checks all the boxes. Eat carrots. That's literally just all boomer coded. Yeah, they got absolutely played by that whole carrots thing. I don't know how that remained until like the late 1900s. Like when did we discover that was just a myth? The whole eating carrots helps with the eyesight thing. Like wasn't it us? Like why didn't that information get disseminated like right when the war ended? I don't understand. I still believed it in the 2010s. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I guess it makes sense. Without an internet, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, I don't blame like the people in these generations though, given that we have like the internet now, and it's so much more easy to compare ourselves and to see wealth. Like relative poverty is now not just like a local thing, and so that's a real issue. Yeah, so but it also allows people to, you know, have relationships with other people, which is cool. So, you know, we're going to have to figure out how to pull the best of technology out, and we're going to have to figure out what people ought to be careful about. I mean, people are still ignorant, right? Right? I mean, including myself, about some things. Granted, I feel like the stuff we write about in part 1, you know, like philosophers from 200 years ago would be like blown away by it, I feel like. Because we just have the, you know, like we have so much more of the equation. That said, it probably wouldn't land well because they don't, they didn't grow up learning about the rigor of science, so they probably wouldn't even buy it.
If they are not really invoking genuine moral categories.
So, when you say moral categories, are you referring to a transcendental right and wrong?
I'm talking about ethical principles, ethical rights and wrong, if you want. They are transcendent because they're not simply in the molecules, as it were. They're above us, transcendent. So yes, in that sense.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are consequences to our behaviors one way or another. And the consequences, it's not just, you know, utilitarian. It's not just, well, if I put toast in too long, it'll burn the toast. But you ought to do the things that you just described. You ought to help that person, okay? I think it's a fairly commonsensible word, a moral category, virtue, vice kind of thing.
I think whether it's commonsensical depends on what's common, right? So I think that this is where
Aha.
these concepts I don't think are one-to-one. So I think doing your dharma is basically the way I would describe your dharma is when I throw a ball in the air, it comes down,
Okay.
right? So dharma is kind of doing what is the second part of what you've kind of signed up for.
So when you say you ought to help the person in the emergency room, all you mean is you're not morally compelled to do that in terms of a virtue, but there is a consequence for you to do that as opposed to doing the opposite.
Yes, and I think there is a layer of morality, but that is not within dharma. So, for example, there are yamas and niyamas, which are things like truthfulness, ahimsa, which means nonviolence. So there's a set of different things that we would generally speaking call morality, and doing those things is usually in accordance with dharma. But, you know, the Mahabharata is a great case of someone saying, I don't want to kill my cousins and I don't want to kill my teacher, and Krishna saying, you absolutely should because it is in accordance with dharma. So I think dharma oftentimes gets like translated over to morality, but I think you lose something in translation.
Greg, can I ask you, do you think you can have a fulfilling life without having a transcendent purpose?
Ooh. All right. Holy Plato, transcendent ethical ideals above us? Yeah, so, I mean, they probably could have duked it out a little more, but I guess Steven's trying to, you know, make the question real direct. He's going to say no, though. He's going to, that's the issue, though. I wish Dr. K kept going on this case because I think he's more equipped to really get down to why that's not necessary for someone to, you know, experience the feeling of purpose and whatnot. It's probably a really big deal for the Christian here that these moral ethics are, you know, transcendent in some sense. So,
In some measure. What I described earlier is if God made us for a purpose and made the world for human flourishing, and I think we get a basic description of that in the beginning of our story, for example, then people who don't even believe in God or even anything religious at all, if they fall within the pattern of the things that God has created for flourishing, they're going to flourish in some significant measure. You mentioned a few moments ago about having children, and this is somewhat of a universal experience. Now, you made a kind of a naturalistic characterization of why we feel that way. My sense is that God made us for that purpose: be fruitful, multiply, subdue. And subdue doesn't mean rape the earth; it means to work productively what God has given us to serve. Now, somebody can get married and stay married and have children and fulfill that purpose there and be very satisfied in doing it, as opposed to all kinds of other variations that it's just going to mess up their life, and they're going to experience satisfaction and fulfillment in it. But that's because they're, in a certain sense, they're doing the things that God has made human beings to do so that they would flourish. It's just like, you can think of it in very mechanistic terms.
he's oh man, that's a crazy way of talking about this, because he's almost being the like the evolution guy now saying that what evolution has, you know, what evolution has made is what we ought to do. I don't remember what that tenet is, but all right. Western philosophical thinking literally begins with Plato saying there's a transcendent realm of forms. Then you have Aristotle with virtue ethics, which influenced the Muslims and Christian clergy. So I think it's natural the way they're talking, that is. Right. Yeah, no, it runs deep.
Vehicle that meant to operate a certain way, and if you do,
I got to listen to that other.
They're doing the things that God has made human beings to do so that they would flourish.
The things that God made humans to do so that they would flourish involves a lot of barbaric stuff that we would not condone today. that's like that is a crazy argument to make. I know that's like kind of the Christian argument, and it's like quite ignorant of what is involved in evolution. But yeah, it is just funny. Me when someone asks me why I ate their cookies. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's a crazy stance here.
It's just like you can think of it in very mechanistic terms. You have a vehicle that meant to operate a certain way, and if you do the things properly for the vehicle, it's...
If he was in the room here, I would just straight up ask him, like, "Hey, do you believe in evolution?" Like, I feel like that's necessary. I don't know if you have. I don't think you can have. This is a crazy take, but I don't think you can have this discussion in a productive way if someone here doesn't actually believe in evolution, and if they don't quite understand the implications of evolution on what we're dealing with. So, like, I think this guy's view is going to be completely religious. I was going to say religion coded. It's like completely in that dimension. There's nothing to say about our physiology or our brain. I respect him. I'll be fair. Greg shows that Darwin's general theory of evolution has nothing to do with science. Are you actually grabbing something for real? Is this like a legit thing? Has nothing to do with science. Oh my gosh. That's this guy? What did he believe? All right, let's figure this out. What's this guy's full name? Kukul. What did Greg Kukul mean with this one? We're getting to the bottom of this. I can't let this evolution slander happen. It is 12 years ago, but I doubt he may have changed his views. In a 2013 article on his Stand to Reason website, Greg Kukul argued that Darwin's general theory of evolution has nothing to do with science because he believes it is fundamentally a philosophical assertion rather than a scientific one. His primary argument centers on the distinction between what he calls the special theory of evolution and the general theory of evolution. Okay. He concedes that the special theory of evolution, which describes limited changes within existing kinds of organisms, microevolution, is a demonstrable scientific principle. We can observe variations in finch beaks, for example. However, he contends with the general theory of evolution, which posits that all life arose from a common ancestor through unguided natural processes. He posits that is a philosophical belief system. Okay. He outlines two main reasons for this assertion. The origin of life. All right, so we could cut away this one right off the bat because I think this is going to be the religious one. Unless he gives some like logical reasoning here and it's not just a presupposing some faith. He argues that for general theory to be a complete scientific explanation, it must account for the origin of the first life from non-living matter. Oh, wow, this goes right back to our discussion. He states that since there is no known scientific explanation for how this could have happened, the theory rests on a philosophical commitment to naturalism, the belief that only natural causes are at play in the world. In his view, to assume a naturalistic origin of life without evidence is a philosophical leap, not a scientific conclusion. Right. It's neither, though. It's a scientific speculation. It's a scientific theory. Right? It's not a conclusion, nor is it a philosophical leap. It is one in which we've got strong theories like the RNA worlds or the RNA world that we talked about earlier today. How does that work then, lad? Evolution is true when small, but false when big. Okay, the nature, the mechanism. He also critiques the creative power attributed to natural selection and mutation. He suggests that while these mechanisms can account for small-scale adaptations, there is a lack of evidence that can produce the vast diversity and complexity of all life from a single common ancestor. So this is where contemporary science really helps us out, because it shows how and why changes were made across a long period of time. He views the extrapolation from microevolution to macroevolution as an unsubstantiated philosophical extension of the observable evidence. Okay, essentially, his statement is not a denial of all aspects of evolutionary biology, only the important ones. Instead, he distinguishes between observable small-scale changes and the broader overarching narrative of universe. So, yeah, the thing that... So he rejects the random trajectory of evolution, right? I guess that's the first question. I think this is the case. I think it requires the general theory. Yes, that's a crucial part of his position. He rejects the idea that the unguided random processes of evolution are sufficient to explain the full diversity and complexity of life. The critique of randomness. When people talk about the random trajectory of evolution, they're usually referring to the role of genetic mutations. In evolutionary theory, these mutations are considered random because they don't arise in response to an organism's needs. They're simply copying errors. Natural selection, which is not random, then preserves the mutations that happen to be beneficial. His argument is that this two-step process, random mutation plus natural selection, lacks the creative power to produce the large-scale changes required for the general theory of evolution. All right. I don't know what to do about this. I think we're just going to have to act like we didn't see it and move on. At least this guy is consistent. I don't want to hear about no evolution was predicted by the temple priest in 2000 BC. Wow. Did someone? I'm curious. Like, was there a prediction like that? Because that would be kind of crazy. I guess we don't know what happened in 2000 BC, right? Like when? How far do we go back? 12. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, how far do we go back in BC? We go back somewhat far, right? Aren't we like, don't we know like 10,000 BC? What's going on? Just not history. But there are pre-Darwinian theorists of evolution like Al-Jahiz. Interesting. All right, well, we could spend like a good 20 minutes going over why this view is incorrect, or we can just continue. I think we're just going to continue, but...
Going to run well into.
So I can have a grand feeling of purpose if I do many of the things that are considered virtuous within Scripture without needing to believe.
Yeah, you could still be virtuous. Certainly, you can do those things. My argument, and this is what I was getting at a little earlier, Dr. K, is that if there is no God establishing a right and wrong, then there is no right and wrong because there is no law that we're conforming ourselves to. We're just doing stuff, all right? Now,
if you believe in sort of evolutionary perspective,
I don't. Taken as a whole, I don't.
That's so. he's operating under this assumption that your retrospection of what is going on is the way that things are, pretty much. I mean, obviously he's not going to say that, but if you can't see that there was a God that said yes, that it was right or wrong, then there was nothing there to do, right? You were just doing stuff. You weren't doing anything right or wrong. But at the same time, you have to consider that the way that God speaks to you is through your experience. So, like the fact that he's not going to acknowledge any of the science behind that experience, because he probably wouldn't, right? We can show that even though we don't understand, even though we can't fill the hard gap of the hard problem of consciousness, we can show how certain areas of the brain are activated when you experience the feeling of I should do this and this thing I did was wrong or whatever it is. Like we understand enough about the brain to know the correlations there. And that is something that he would not be able to accept. 20 minutes. We know damn well that it'd be 40 minutes. Yeah, it would probably be me reading through. I would probably just prompt Gemini and then read through it. Then we'd start talking about the pen. The pen would probably come up. Okay, so today won't count as Evolution Day, but we do need to have an Evolution Day in October. One day a month. I think that's the rule. One day of evolution, where we talk through it. I should. You know what? I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna save that Gemini convo, and we're gonna pick up on it later this month. That's what we're doing. This is how we extract content from random Christians online. All right, let's continue.
Not the way that Alex has taken. It's a grand explanation of pretty much everything.
It's not an explanation of everything. It's an explanation of the variance of life on Earth.
Because evolution does. I was thinking about my dog. I was thinking about Pablo. I was thinking, why does he have sex with other dogs? Why does he protect his puppies?
Yeah.
Why does he do these things that somewhat in Dr. K's example there, he takes care of things. He takes care of me when I'm not in the house. If someone comes in and my girlfriend's there, he takes care of my girlfriend. He barks only when she's at home alone. So he seems to be expressing some form of morality. He seems to understand his own sort of idea of right and wrong. But
I wouldn't characterize it that way, as if he's thinking, I ought to do this, and if I don't do that, then I'm doing something wrong. I think animals have instincts that they're imbued with that can be influenced by natural factors to some degree, I guess. But they are made for purposes, and this is the reason that many of the creatures act the way they do, is because of these very sophisticated instincts that allow them to get along in life and do well.
Survive and reproduce.
But I don't have any reason to think that there's, survive and reproduce, of course. But I don't have any reason to think that they're thinking, I'm doing the moral thing. And if they didn't do the thing that we would be, it would be appropriate to accuse them of doing something immoral.
History's almost shown that even in times where we look back and go, that was not the moral thing, like, Nazis in World War II, they acted in a way that was helped them survive in the context they're in. So the Nazi that would go to the concentration camp and come home and be really nice to his family, he thought he was doing the right thing.
This is why one of the reasons I think the evolutionary explanation is inadequate, okay? Because it seems that there are lots of things that people do that seem to be good for them or for their tribe that characteristically we'll look at and we'll assess it. And the assessment is that is wrong, it's evil, it's wicked. And I think that our assessments are reliable in that regard, okay? That we have moral intuitions that allow us to see things that are real about that. And these things are relatively universal. I mean, it doesn't matter where you live or when you live. People are asking the question.
The ignorance here is crazy. Like that he would take this example. This is by the way, Stephen, phenomenal example of how evolution does show that people can get into a place where they feel like they're doing something good, and other people can say that is ridiculously not good. And what he's doing again, he's just pointing out that we can retrospectively say, oh, what they did was bad, and then this, because we can think that and feel that, then that means I don't even know what was the actual argument here that this isn't a good example of evolution because we can think that it's bad. And I don't know. I can't figure it out. What is the host saying? I think the host said I think the host did bring up a pretty good point there, pointing out that that morality is something felt rather than something transcendent, and even what this guy thinks is felt is not transcendent. It's felt. But because he doesn't have the understanding of what his brain's doing and his body is doing in that process of generating what he's feeling, then yeah.
Question about the problem of evil in the world, okay? And
But
I think
the
it's because
definition of what evil was seems to change over time. Because me, I mean, I wouldn't be sat at this table a couple hundred years ago because I'm black, and everybody at the time thought that was the right thing. They didn't think that was an evil thing at the time.
well, everybody at the time didn't think that.
A
But,
lot
you know,
of
there
people-
are going to be
a lot of
social
people.
mores and that are going to change over time, and people do respond in different ways. But just because you have
He
variations in the
he
way
should have said not everyone, but the Christians. Oh man.
people believe about morality doesn't mean that there isn't a morality that's a sound morality. And C.S. Lewis has done a study of this, looked at the kinds of things that seem to transcend culture in terms of assessments, moral assessments that seem to be true about every culture. A lot of times the differences are not differences in moral facts, but they are like the morality has actually changed, but a difference in perception. Okay, so what counts as heroism in some cases would not count as heroism in other cases, even though heroism is considered a noble kind of thing.
I've been waiting for an opportunity to rewind to the fact that we just brushed over two of what I think are the best available, at least first came to mind, explanations as to why children get cancer. And I just wondered, as a question, whether you consider, whether your explanation sounds to you, as your explanation sounds to you, as I think both of them sound to me, and I don't know how they sound to you, Stephen, but the idea that the thing that we are most fundamentally confronted with, I think, on an existential level, is suffering. And there's our own suffering, and then there's the suffering of others, and the seemingly meaningless suffering of a child who's undergoing cancer and does not survive it. And I'm told that in the face of such existential tragedy, I turn to religion to give us a sort of sense of fulfillment and a sense of explanation. But when asked about the mechanism of how, I'm told it's because at some undisclosed number of years ago, somebody committed a sin against God, and that's why your child has now died of cancer. There are millions of people who listen to this show. There will be people listening to this whose children have died of cancer. I wonder if that brings them any kind of consolation.
Well, I don't-
Similarly, the idea that, you know, maybe it's some disgruntled angels who didn't want to come down to Earth for too long, and so if anything, you're actually doing them a favor by killing them of cancer. I don't know if that's bringing the kind of
Well, I
fulfillment
don't
that
know.
we're looking for.
What's your answer to that?
I don't think I have one, but I don't like people professing that they do have an answer, but when it comes down to it, actually saying something which I think will provide the opposite effect. And I don't mean this personally, I mean as a
No,
point
I'm
of
not taking
religious
it personally, but
explanation.
I don't-
The idea
I don't
that
know that
this
it's going to bring comfort.
Everyone's going to get a chance to respond to this.
Sorry.
So.
the idea that this even approximates an explanation as to why this happens. I would ask you to consider what you find more likely if we assume that we are essentially existing here as accidental organisms just competing in a struggle for survival with no endowed meaning or supervision. What might we expect to find? And I would ask what you would expect to find if we were created with purpose by a loving God who wants us all to come into communion with him, but for some reason thinks it's necessary that we exist in this vale of tears in this material world first.
Well,
What would you expect to find? I don't think. And then look at what you do find. Look at what you do find in the natural world. Even if you just take into consideration non-human animal suffering, just an unfathomable amount of negative experience for seemingly no reason. Not to mention the fact that children are getting cancer, as you say, and as you've already alluded to, there are evils that humans commit, like the Holocaust, but there are evils which they don't, like earthquakes and tsunamis and the like. Well, I don't think we would expect to see any of this if we assume that hypothesis. But if we assume that we are just accidentally existing organisms in a struggle for survival, not only do we explain this, but we also come to expect it. So I think it provides a much better explanation. That is not to say justification. The idea, we were talking about evolution, you said that the problem that you have with the Darwinian worldview is that it seems to favor survival of the fittest, and yet there are things which evolution seems to point to that we would morally condemn. Well, of course, because evolution by natural selection is an explanation for how things got the way they were. It's in no way a justification for behaviors. It doesn't even function that way. No scientific theory of why things happen are any kind of justification, any more than Newton's laws of gravity are a justification, a moral justification for the motion of the planets. That's, of course, it's not the case. It's just an explanation.
But the
I just really want to drive home this point, that it has to do more. If you want religious traditions to do what you claim that they do, which is provide existential comfort for people who are suffering, you have to do more in the face of children dying of cancer than some reference to mythical human beings who existed, or in a way
so let me
that is
respond. There's
completely
Oh man. Pipe down, Alex. A Calvinist is speaking. The more that this guy talks, honestly, the more Alex is sounding pretty good in this whole conversation. Oh man. All right, I have to use the restroom, but we'll hear this guy's response when I get back. BRB. Okay. I would hit it off with Greg for show. I'd just agree with him and then put in a cheeky little unlike Alex Connor every few minutes into the combo. It would work. I'm sure it would work. All right, let's see. What's the rebut?
Unintelligible.
There's a lot there, okay? I don't expect it's going to be comfort to anybody to say, who's suffering from whatever, to say that there was a fall, okay? The fall is just the explanation for what went wrong and why there is wrong in the world. Like I said earlier, doesn't matter where you live or when you live, everybody knows something's wrong. And the way they express that concern about something wrong is in moral terms. The world is not the way it ought to be. It should be different. And then when you give examples of it, sometimes there's natural evil, but generally it's examples of moral evil, what we would call moral evil, okay? Things that people shouldn't do, okay?
That's why I
Now,
particularly avoided those.
No, right. You didn't include any examples, but the implication is, and this is where Richard Dawkins is famous.
No, I think what Alex meant by that is he specifically wanted to point out all of the animal suffering that happens that can't be described by evil, right? Like there's a significant amount of brutality involved in the natural world. Like we've got a subreddit for it. Nature is metal. And then is that one still around? Is it now Nature is effing metal? I don't know. But yeah, I think that was the category that Alex was specifically pointing to because you couldn't make sense of it through evil, of people doing things that were wrong.
This is exactly the kind of world we'd expect if there was at the basis, no design, no justice, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Well, I actually think this isn't the world that we find, the one he just described. Yes, it's a world filled with suffering, and there's a way of explaining that, which you just did. There's also another way of explaining it that has a solution, okay?
What is that explanation?
Pardon me? That God is in the process of solving the problem of evil over time.
The explanation for why the evil's there in the first place. You said the fall. I don't mean to interrupt, but you've referenced the fall twice now. And the last time I tried this, it seemed like you sort of said that you don't really know. But if the fall
I wasn't giving particular details about the ancestry of human evolution.
What
or
is the
anything
fall?
like that.
Historically, what is the fall?
The fall is when our first parents, characteristically known as Adam and Eve in the story, in the account of reality, rebelled against God. And when they rebelled
what did they
against
do?
God, they disobeyed him is what's important. He had given them a restriction. They disobeyed that. And when they disobeyed that, they broke their relationship with God through rebellion. They broke their relationship with each other. They broke their relationship with the environment. All of that had these kind of cosmic effects. There's a solution, though. That's just the first three
Do you know what the
chapters.
command
Let me
was?
just finish the thought. Okay. The
This is crazy. Darmadon, what's good? Alex versus apologists. I still find interesting enough. Yeah, like I was saying, Darmadon, that now that this guy's had a chance to talk a lot, Alex is looking pretty great in this whole conversation. In this, here we go. Greg dropped an absolute nuke. In this regard, I actually like Plotinus and the Gnostics, even though Plotinus and the Neo-Platonists critique them view of worldly evil. It actually illuminated something. Do you mind describing what that account is, or what their view, or I could put it into Gemini if you'd want. But yeah, I mean, Alex now he's got a softball here, or what is it? It's got a softball, yeah. He's got a softball, pushing back on. This guy's evoking the Adam and Eve story as if it occurred sometime within evolution, like he's that type of Christian. So I don't know. I don't understand. Yeah, crazy that you drill down on apologists and they hate the world. Yeah, or they're just so ready to make sense of sin and evil through this lens, which is quite unsatisfying, but it's so dogmatic. It's just faith, right?
The principal issue is rebellion or disobedience. Okay, there are different ways it's characterized, but that's the point, in my view, the disobedience. Okay.
Of what, though?
Pardon me?
Disobedience of what? Like, what was it?
God
that was
told
disobeyed?
them not to do one thing.
What was the
Don't
thing?
eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they disobeyed.
Do you interpret that literally?
Pardon?
Like an actual tree and an
Yes,
actual fruit?
I do take that as a straightforward account, but that's not the important part. I don't want to
So
get
children
caught
get
up in-
cancer because somebody
Pardon me?
ate. So children get cancer because a few million years ago someone ate fruit.
Let me just back up and give you the entire
Like literally.
account.
Okay.
Dr. K is going to be like, I do not want to get involved anymore. I'll leave the whole thing. Here we go. I don't even know who this Plotinus character is. The privation of good versus the prison of the soul. Plotinus and the Gnostics on worldly evil. In the philosophical landscape of late antiquity, the nature of evil was a profound and contentious issue. For the Neoplatonist philosopher Plotinus, evil was not a tangible force, but a privation of the good, a deficiency at the furthest remove from the ultimate reality of the one. In stark contrast, the Gnostic traditions viewed the material world as an inherently evil creation, a prison for the divine sparks of humanity fashioned by a lesser, ignorant, or malevolent deity. Right? Fashioned by a potentially malevolent. So this is why you said the Gnostics were also Christians, right? Their way of thinking, of course, isn't really traditional. Plotinus. Oh, Plotinus. All right. All right, this fundamental disagreement on the origin and nature of evil formed a significant point of critique from Plotinus and his followers against the Gnostics. So, okay. I think we've got it, though. The concept of the one, the ultimate ineffable source of all existence, which is synonymous with the good. Okay. This is just, I feel like this is two ways of interpreting the same thing. You could just say that doing bad is actually just is lacking doing good or being away from the good, unless I misunderstood. The positive, transcendent, unknowable, true God who was entirely good. Yeah, maybe, you know what? The further an entity is from the one, the less real and less good it is. For Plotinus, matter stands at the lowest rung of this hierarchy. It is the principle of formlessness, disunity, and indeterminacy. Because evil is the absence of the good, and the good is characterized by unity and form, matter becomes the primary source of worldly evil. All right. I don't know if there's much more to gain here. So let us continue.
Please.
This would be, I think, more helpful.
I'm not trying to be difficult, by the way. I don't want to just brush over these points when we reference. I mean, people listening might be like, I've never heard of this fool, I've never heard of Adam and Eve, and they'll need to know what
The
you're
point I'm
talking
making
about.
is that there was a disobedience by human beings.
I think Alex is, I don't know if that was, I think that was a little disingenuous. I think it's because there's so many people watching, it's very important that we point out the absurdity of these takes in a modern landscape. Granted, this is not a good argument against why people shouldn't take on religion only for the sake of it actually leading to their lives being emotionally rewarding and meaningful. But that, that's the tricky discussion to make or to have, but I don't think they're going to arrive there.
On their relationship with God, which they were created for, and had an impact on the rest of the world. And since then, that problem of evil, broadly read, since then the world's been broken, and God has a plan for bringing that back together, not only for making the world whole again, but also for bringing human beings back in proper relationship with Him when they're in rebellion with Him, and this is where Jesus comes in. Now, I've written a piece called The Story of Reality, a book that's meant to characterize that in fairly clear terms. In more general terms, it isn't meant to answer all of these questions, because some of them, frankly, are imponderables. But the larger picture can be understood and is in the story, is in the account of reality in the scriptures, in the Hebrew scriptures and in the Christian scriptures. They form a unit, okay? And these are the things that Jesus spoke to. And Jesus took these things seriously based on what He had to say about these particular things, okay? So because broadly speaking now, because we live in a broken world, there is an answer that we have to that. We have a possible answer. It was Bertrand Russell who famously said, how are you going to talk about God when you're kneeling at the bed of a dying child, which I think is very emotionally compelling. But I listened to philosopher William Lane Craig, who you also know, I think, who said, what is Bertrand Russell the atheist going to say when he's kneeling at the bed of a dying child? Tough luck, too bad, that's just the way it goes. There is no answer that he has.
Dr. K, can you come with your response as well?
Sure. First of all, Alex, I want to thank you for bringing up and being a bit bulldogish. I mean that in a good way. You grab something.
Oof. I wish they could bring on a Catholic cardinal or Plotinist academic. Yeah, it would be interesting. Though, I feel like bringing on anyone that isn't at all open to the way that Dr. K is talking about this is not really going to be a productive conversation in the sense that it's actually leading to the goal of what this conversation was about. I mean, you could have other great conversations with the different characters here, but I'll give that one to Greg. He's not wrong. Oh, I think I missed what Greg said. I don't recall. All right, let's continue.
You were like, this is not okay.
Well, we forget that people are listening to this whose children have died of cancer.
I totally get
I think we
that.
just need to keep.
I see.
100%. So-
Yeah. When you're that's the unfortunate thing. I think that in the wake of, or I don't know if it's in the wake, but in the face of a child dying of cancer, the only thing that I think I could honestly tell the parent is that this is a tragedy. Like there's no I'm not gonna tell them that there's like no grand meaning, but I could tell, I could tell them like, let's go forward in the name of this kid. Like, let's do something because of this tragedy. Let's do something positive out of this. I wouldn't even. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I probably wouldn't say something unless I had to, or unless there was a reason for me to say something. But if you had to, I'm not gonna lie and say like, oh, this, you know what? This is controversial. I was gonna say I'm not gonna lie and say, oh, this kid went to heaven. Because I don't think he did. But I'm not gonna say that to the parent. Unfortunately, just things happen. I think that's the thing. Like, people just don't understand how much terrible stuff both happens right now in the world and must have happened in the long trajectory of evolution. What goes with understanding how much our new technology has increased the well-being of humans requires you to understand where we came from. Like, the fact that childbirth currently is so relatively safe requires knowing that many, many people died in childbirth, like, not too long ago. So, yeah, I think it's a lack of understanding of, it's like ignorance that leads you to believe that there must be, but you know what, people have been religious this entire time, so I guess it's something that was required in the face of a lot of this just absolute tragedy happening. I mean, if the parent is saying that, then I'd agree. Yeah, I'm not going to say, no, I disagree. We don't want to be really tacky here, but all right. How much longer do I actually want to go on this? Because I don't think we're doing the full thing, and I got to switch over to Hades. Maybe should I just switch now? All right, let's get to
I'm
the
really
end
glad
of this.
you said that, because I realized that I offered a terrible example. And I say this as someone, I can remember the day I was a third-year medical student on my first pediatric rotation. I was working in the ICU.
All right, I think this is a good start to this next one. Can we have a fulfilling life without a transcendent purpose? Wonderful. Ads, how to create a meaningful life as an agnostic. Okay. All right, so hopefully this latter part is looking pretty promising. It looks like we're gonna get to productive discussion here. Religion is required because it's a social contract, especially the Abrahamic tradition. There's a reason why the Noahide laws command people to establish courts. Also, I got to do it. From a Spenglerian sense, there are no atheist civilizations. Right? Back to the we're all Christians in one form or another thing. Right. Well, yeah. So that's the question. Like, can we be explicit about is it possible to go without a religion, but to acknowledge that much of our culture is still grounded upon religious ethics that we should keep. And like maybe that's just too complicated. Like perhaps humans literally need to think that there's a deity to provide laws, because otherwise, there's nothing to keep them secure. But I'm not sure. Sure, and it's worldwide now. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna switch over now. I'm gonna switch this stream because so that we have separate VODs for Hades. So I will be back up in like 2 minutes, maybe tops. So BRB.